Hello, you beautiful degenerates, and welcome to Links and Locks, the Action Network's golf betting podcast presented by Bet365. I'm your host, Roberto Arguello, and I'm excited to be joined by Nick Bretwish and Spencer Aguiar this week as we preview the CJ Cup Byron Nelson this week on the PGA Tour from TPC Craig Ranch in McKinney, Texas, in the greater Dallas area. Spencer had a big show last week. We faded Billy Horschel and Tyson Alexander. That was your best bet. That hit. Horschel and Alexander failed to make the cut. Hadwin and Taylor did. Easy money on Friday afternoon, but that wasn't it. You weren't done making money. You hit Rory McIlroy and Shane Lowry outright, plus 850 to win the tournament. So congrats on cashing that at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans. What is your best bet for this week's the CJ Cup Byron Nelson?
So this head-to-head price has been on the move. That's a very common answer when talking about some of these matchups on the show weekly. I took Garrick Higo plus 122 over Ryo Hisatsune. I feel like I almost would be better sneezing while trying to say his last name there. I think that's the correct pronunciation of it. But the best you can find in this space is plus 107 right now. I would have this good up to minus 125. I think this is a very interesting cap, and it's been pushed in both directions because when I initially hit this, and we'll talk about this more in a second, when I pushed it down from plus 122, it got to minus 110 both ways. You have sites out there like Data Golf that were able to push that back up in the other direction because I know that they liked the Rio side of that wager. But to me, this was a pretty significant edge of about 40 points of value, and anytime I can get a plus number on something that I have better than 50-50, I'm always going to punch those tickets. So I like Garrick Higo this week.
So similar kind of bet as last week where it was minus 110 for Taylor and his partner Hadwin, and they ended up being plus 120 later on. So love to see the line movement coming in our direction. Nick, what is your best bet for this week's CJ Cup Byron Nelson?
It's going to be a little gross going back to the placement market per usual. I'm going with Matty Schmid, top 20, where ties pay in full at plus 350.
All right. Schmid top 20 plus 350 with ties paid in full. We'll get into that cap in a moment. But first, Spencer, or before we get into y'all's picks, disclaimer, I'm not giving any picks this week. I will be on PGA Tour Live hosting in relief on the feature group and marquee group streams. So be sure to check in on PGA Tour Live on ESPN Plus. I'll be with DA Point, so I'm excited to break down the golf with him this week. So no picks from me, but we'll get back to Spencer. Why are you betting on Higo against Hisatsune?
I liked Rio a lot coming into the season. I've come on this show and had really bullish discussions about what I think his career outlook is. This is a 21-year-old player where I ran numbers before the year, and one of the things I like to do is see where I am more aggressive on certain players than the general public seems to be, or their official World Golf Rankings. Rio has a different situation, I think, because he was a top 100 player coming into the year just with some of the stuff that he had done on his tour. But essentially it was him, Steven Yeager, Peter Quest. Now, we're going to be able to have a Peter Quest conversation here. This has been a very difficult journey for him that he hasn't necessarily gotten the starts that you would think. It's been this difficulty that he's encountered. We'll talk about that when we get to the outright market. But regardless of how optimistic I was with Hisatsune, I do have some concerns that we might have, I don't want to say more name recognition necessarily, but maybe more outlook of long-term pedigree that's coming into play here, because I don't necessarily think this is the best course fit for him at TPC Craig Ranch. He ranked 117th from an overall rank perspective inside of my model because of that combination of shaky form and questionable data. He has only been better than 75th place during one of his past 4 starts. And then it's that statistical profile that continues to compound on itself that just over and over again with all of the categories that I ran pushed him way down that board for me and outside the top 100. So 139th for expected putting on similar green complexes. That's going to be these bent grass average to fast surfaces. 137th for projected strokes gained total at TPC Craig Ranch. He was 124th when taking on TPC properties of any kind. We always talk on this show, and we can discuss it more when we get into the course breakdown. All TPC properties are very similar in nature, so I think that is not where you want to be at 129th there, or 124th there, sorry. And then he's 129th when you take the total driving, when you take these wide open fairways that have no rough. I think when you look at the overall profile, a golfer like Jason Day was able to use the total driving that he had while he didn't have the weighted proximity. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't necessarily get that with the profile here. But when you get 117th place grade for weighted proximity, 140th when looking into proximity from outside 200 yards, I think this is a shaky profile. I was surprised to see a plus number in this situation. And it adds to the fact here where I always say I'm trying to find fade candidates over anything else. And this is what we exactly get in this spot. But my model really liked Higo. And that's not a prototypical answer that you hear me say. Like, it's a selfless plug of my alma mater of UNLV. But like these UNLV golfers, when you throw them into Texas, all see an upside. You could go across the board here with Adam Scott and Higo and Hoffman and Moore and Montgomery. Like, there's a lot of players in this tournament that are intriguing. So I thought a plus number here for something that I had better win equity than a 50-50 bet was a good price here at any plus number you're getting.
I like it. I think that makes a ton of sense. And Higo, super long off the tee and has gotten a little bit more consistent as well. And of course, we got to plug Higo because he's one of our lab golf brethren with the putter. Nick, why are you bullish on Matty Schmid this week?
Per usual, it's going to be a number grab for me. So I had this proper right around plus 310, especially with the ties paid in full. If anything, I'd have that closer to just 3-1 flat. Schmid's kind of been a guy I've been watching a little bit. I know Spencer and I talked about him on the DFS side of things a little bit for the Players Championship. It was very sneaky there. Another TPC course that really doesn't fit his game for the most part. He's more of a, bomb it down the fairway type of guy. He's hitting a lot of fairways this year. It's the most he's hit in 3 seasons. So I love to see that, especially when it's a course that's not going to be very penal when you do miss the fairway. So just playing the distance game here, playing the hot putter, which most of those putting stats were on Bermuda grass. So we'll see how the switch is over to bent grass. But again, I'm just more betting on the upside here. It's the best iron play we've seen consistently out of Schmid since probably, I guess, his debut in 2021. And that was very limited. So other than that, yeah, just 5 top 30 finishes in his past 6 events. He hasn't missed a cut since the Cognizant Classic. And again, another course that probably wouldn't fit his type of game. I think with the wide open atmosphere of TPC Craig Ranch and his ability to ball strike and play in the wind, I think this is a really good spot for him. So I will take the 40 points of expected value on my numbers there and take Schmid inside the top 20.
I like it. So we got Schmid in the top 20 market. We got Higo over Hisatsune. So those are our best bets this week for the CJ Cup Byron Nelson. Fellas, we'll get into our course preview, outright bets after that. We'll go through the rest of the card. We'll talk one and done because we didn't have one and done last week. And then we'll go through our rapid fire as well. Spencer, why don't you take a crack at the course preview for TPC Craig Ranch? You mentioned that it has some similar characteristics to some other TPC courses.
Yeah, I think TPC Craig Ranch is a very straightforward ask of all players teeing it up this week. A lot of that comes down to the TPC nature that you just alluded to. Again, we only have 3 iterations of the contest to pull from numerically when trying to run data inside a model. I think normally when you get that return, a 3-year sample size for any course would typically lead to more questions than we would ideally want, since a lack of long-term quantifiable metrics will only convolute the process. But it's essentially what we're talking about here, of where there's volatility because you have a winning score of 24 under par, but then you also have the concrete data points on the flip side of that because you have these constant answers that you can pinpoint for the best way to play the venue. I thought the most effective strategy I could find to leverage the course specific characteristics were bent grass putting. That's something that we're seeing for only, the second or third time this year. TPC properties, that goes into everything that we talked about. The easy scoring conditions, that's going to be players that can make birdies in bunches. This is not going to be one of your tests that single digit under par is going to win. So I want birdie makers, venues over 7,400 yards. I added in a little bit of wind play. I kind of did that in a back end part of the equation. I looked at mostly Texas courses there. You're always going to get wind in that area. So I kind of added that to wind play. But I think when you take all of that and then you merge it together with this highly correlated trend of you need distance at all levels for the week. That's going to make separating models a little bit more challenging because I do think you get the same answer over and over again, but the field averages 12 yards more off the tee with the driver in hand because of this wide open setup of the track. And then it also delivers over a 35% distribution of approach shots from outside 200 yards. That's a stat that landed nearly 13% above PGA Tour average. Some of those answers add a secondary problem because we can talk about this when we get to the odds board. And it's funny because Nick and I were speaking of this before the show, and I see a lot of hold percentage in the market. And Nick and I both ended up with a little bit more exposure than I think either one of us thought we were going to take on for the week. But essentially out there, I mean, like to condense that answer, if you could only look at three things, it'd be proximity over 200 yards, bent grass putting expectations, weighted total driving. I think everything else that I talked about from that course specific answer of the TPC properties and every other category there, that would be more of that filler information that I'm trying to add to my build.
Yeah, we were talking off air about how there just haven't been that many bent grass courses on tour so far this season. The only one that really popped up was Augusta National. So different challenge this week with us mostly being in the South. So seeing a lot of Bermuda grass that's dormant with Poa trivialis over it has been the most common putting surface, but now moving to bent grass as it's becoming that season on the PGA Tour. Without further ado, well, Nick, I'll give you a chance. If you'd like to add anything on the course preview to hop in. If not, who you got on your outright card?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything Spencer said, again, he's the best in the industry at breaking down a course, in my opinion, and doing it in a very efficient manner. So thank you for that, Spencer. But overall, like to me, everything that he said kind of checks the box of what I was looking for is just like well-rounded golfers. And everybody's, it's going to be tough to, if you're just strictly using statistics and proximities to build your model, it is going to be tough because everybody's distance off the tee is going to be a lot, like varied. Like I'm interested in Mark Hubbard this week. Handicapping Mark Hubbard is a lot different than handicapping Matthias Smith. So having those like different expected proximities from each player based on what they do off the tee is kind of like more of a manual process, in my opinion, unless you have some crazy AI stuff like Spencer's probably using back there that he doesn't tell us about. But that just overall, the well-roundedness of a golfer when you do miss a green, just like most TPC properties, like most PDI courses as well, I kind of handicapped that very similarly. You're going to need to get up and down. So I do put a little more emphasis on scrambling this week as I would on other courses. But other than that, no. The bent grass putting is going to be very important. And I think with a very limited data sample size for a lot of these golfers, especially the young guns coming up with, a lot of the elevated players not playing this week, it's going to be very interesting.
Nick, I will say, I've made some AI pictures. You've seen it for what we did for Better Golf Pod. It does have this.
That was great.
There's distorted faces in it. AI needs to improve itself there, but AI is going to be something to be reckoned with. Like it's wild. Like this is not a show of rap music or any of that, but like, I don't know if you guys saw, Drake released a song where it's a diss track to Kendrick Lamar, and like they had it dubbed in voices of them not actually, obviously Tupac is not alive anymore, but Tupac and Snoop Dogg. So AI is doing wild things out there.
Wait, real quick. Drake doesn't like Kendrick Lamar?
They're in a beef right now.
Dude, I don't know where you find out this information, probably just like the internet or whatever, but Kendrick Lamar, I'm not a big rap guy, but Kendrick Lamar's voice is very unique and I appreciate it. So I'm on Kendrick's side on this one. Kendrick, you're probably listening, getting your picks in for the show. I got your back, dude, if you're, and he's American. Drake's Canadian, so whatever.
We're in a rap
war. The Canadians have legal online sports gambling, so shout out Canada. They cashed our best bet last week with Nick Taylor and Adam Hadwin, and we know Drake's a better. So, fellas, without any further ado, let's get into the outright card and see if we can get Drake to tail some of our plays this week. Stay hot. Spencer, I'll give you the tee first. Who you got on your outright card here in the Dallas area this week?
Kind of like I said at the beginning, this is double, triple the exposure I expected to take on. It's another high hold percentage market, and it's going to be interesting. I have not run numbers since Will Zalatoris has pulled out of the event, so you're going to see some shift that's going to occur, and oftentimes it ends up being a little bit too steep on it.
Was there any reason for Will? I know like he withdrew like right as we were pressing record, so I do not have any news as to why.
Here's what I'm hoping for, at least from the Zalatoris part of the answer. I don't know what it is at this moment. I didn't necessarily think this was the best course fit for him. I've heard, whether this is true or not, that the course is kind of rough right now. If hopefully he's okay with everything with the back, but if it's a property that he doesn't feel comfortable with and he has any concerns, like it's probably better to pull out of it. Like to me, when I looked at the top of the board and I didn't necessarily find the value that I wanted in a lot of these spots, I didn't quite get there. And I guess it wouldn't have mattered because I would have been refunded anyway. But I like the idea of betting Speith third day in a matchup against Zalatoris. He was going to be one of my big fade candidates. So it might hurt a little bit from an in-tournament betting perspective because I'm not going to get that opportunity to take him on now. But I hope it's not health-wise. Maybe Roberto knows a little bit more.
Yeah, it's not good news. He said that, so obviously Zalatoris had the surgically repaired back. He came back a little earlier than expected. He said that there was a flare-up this week. He's ahead of schedule according to his doctors, but unfortunately this period, first 6 months back after the injury, is very key and needs to put his long-term health ahead of the short-term chances of winning. So
why the hell did he play the Zurich then? I don't get it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm not a doctor.
He grew up in Dallas, moved to Dallas when he was 9 years old, and then started kicking people like my ass in junior golf. So I know he wanted to be back and play this event. Obviously, Jordan Speith, some of the other guys, Scotty Scheffler would be here if he wasn't expecting a kid. But unfortunately, Zalatoris is out this week. Hopefully, the back is all right for the Wells Fargo next week and, of course, the PGA Championship. But back to you guys and the outright cards.
Yeah, so I started with Steven Jaeger at 33-1. You can actually find a 35-1 out there right now with our sponsors Bet365. And I do want to give a shout out to Bet365. Like you could take this for what it's worth. Obviously, they're the sponsors of the show, but they do the best job in the outright market of anybody out there. That is a true comment to this. That is beyond any sponsorship or anything with that. Like their numbers are always better than the rest of the space. So shout out to them to always look inside the enhanced market. You'll get a couple points better mostly than every other place.
Lowest hold percentage, I believe, in the legal market too.
Yeah, they're a great book. If you have access to them, I would say that they are the premier shop that you can find in the legal space right now. So they're doing great things over there. When it comes to Jaeger here, another player or another person who's doing great things on his own, like I'm aware that it's hard to win twice in 4 events. I think that sentiment would be fine to at least look more into if this number of his had plummeted after winning. Like if we got a negative EV commodity that all of a sudden pushed him down to this 18-1 range, like we're getting a lot of these players at the top, sure, I could make the argument that now we don't have value on Steven Jaeger anymore from where we're at, but he landed in a zone here that's outside 30-1. I got him at 50 at Houston, but I've always said in any of these spots, when he's 30-1 or higher, I think he's a really intriguing commodity to consider because of the ball striking acumen that he brings to the table. So he's first in my model for pure upside. When you remove his floor outcome from the equation, that's something that does matter here. But if we're just shooting for win equity, and Roberto, you mentioned this before the show, and I really like it. Like, there's an argument to be made. I'm not necessarily saying it's right or wrong with it, but there's an argument to be made that I do think at his very best, Jaeger is the best golfer in this field. And that's not necessarily the sentiment that would be shared by many. And that's why I'm always higher in the market or than the rest of the market would be. So I took him at 35-1, just a bunch of top 10 finishes throughout my model. And if you really want to get technical with this, I know this means nothing in the grand scheme of things, but there's one player who's beaten Scotty Scheffler since March. Here's your man right here. It's the only guy who's gotten across the finish line over him. So took him at 33-1. You can find 35-1. I don't know if I love these two wagers after adding some extra stuff into the back end of the equation. I did take Keith Mitchell at 40-1 and Tom Hoagie at 33-1. I'm going to include them together here just because I do have concerns about the lack of upside after punching the tickets. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on it to maybe compound on that issue a little bit more. Maybe you have a different thought than I do. Essentially, it came down for me when I originally punched the ticket. Hoagie's irons, Mitchell's driver. Those are high-end marks that you're going to get from the mix there. I think you have a general lack of upside that enters the mix, and these are some of those reduced numbers that worry me ever so slightly. They were borderline values to begin with, and then when I added on the back end of the stuff, I have a little bit more concerns than I did initially. But I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm not getting out of the tickets at this point, and if they win, I will be coming on the show next week and celebrating it just like I celebrated Lowry and Rory during the Zurich. So I think they're borderline values at the price. I think you just have to know what you're buying into, and maybe when I get done with this, you guys can possess maybe a little better of an outlook even than what I said there if you have a differing opinion. I took Adam Schenk at 50 to 1. Unfortunately, that is a number that's been on the move against us. I wrote about this on the Action Network Best Bets article that we do on Monday before that number moves. So I thought 50 to 1 was a great price for him. You have some of that lack of Texas pedigree inside of my sheet. You see that a little bit with his lack of course history that he's presented here. But when you take weighted long iron production, expected driving, bent grass putting, there were only 2 players that ranked above him. The first is Jason Day, who's the defending champion. So there's a reason why he's won this contest. The second one would be Peter Quest, which Peter Quest broke my model this week. I got him at 100 to 1. I bet this to win 12 units versus the typical 7 that I do. If I'm being honest here, and this is a very aggressive stance I'm about to say. It's not quite to the high-end nature that we got at the Valero, but when Corey Connors won the Valero at 250 to 1 when he was a Monday qualifier in that position, and Quest is not a Monday qualifier, he's getting in from his past results that he has put together, but this is a player that has not been seen on tour all the time because he wasn't able to get his card. And we've been in a spot with him to where I think he is a legitimate top 50 player in the world when he gets these starts on tour. And I normally in these positions would try to hand regress some of these totals because you always have to be concerned that limited sample size will push you in the wrong direction. But I have 2023 data from him I can pull from. My numbers loved him in 2023. So when I incorporated the 2023 stats and the 2024 numbers, I think you just have an elite driver of the ball who's good with his long iron play. And you get a position here of a golfer that really does have a high ceiling. Corey Connors was number 1 at the Valero when he was the Monday qualifier. This is not quite the same spot with Peter Quest for me, but this is a top 10 player in my model that I do believe that there's different iterations of the market that you can consider him in. I probably would go more for the upside answers than any of the safety marks because there's still some, I want to even say concerns with it. It's just, he's not a player playing every single week. And there's a lot of pressure on him when he does do these starts because at any moment he's back to trying the Monday qualify for all these events. But I really liked him at 100 to 1. And then the last player that I will talk about is Garrett Kigo here at 125 to 1. My model saw this positive upside return from him that he possessed in expected driving versus a generic course on tour. He jumped from outside the top 25 to inside the top 10. I know a lot of the recent off the tee data is going to leave a ton to be desired, but we say this all the time on this show. Not every single course is built quite in the same way. And this was a discussion that Nick and I had on Better Golf recently about JT Poston when I believe at the RBC Heritage, I believe it was. You can correct me if I was wrong on that, Nick, but a lot of these players like Schenk and some of these names, they're very specific in their schedule. And now they all of a sudden have to play these larger events because they're in there. There's the money. You're playing tournaments that you're not normally used to taking on. And I do think that when you get them at more of one of these prototypical tracks, that makes sense. And I know for Schenk, this is a long course and you could make some arguments about that, maybe not necessarily being ideally suited, but my model loved him. Like he was inside the top 8 win equity candidates. I think that the movement around him is very sharp. He's a sharp mover in all the matchup markets, and it's against a lot of players that I respect this week, and my model seems to agree with a lot of those takes. So I thought Schenk at 50 was value. I would make an argument that Schenk even at 40, 45 is still value. So that's my outright card. I wasn't expecting to have 0.91 units at risk here, but this is where I ended up.
I love it.
I want to touch on a couple of those
my price on Schenk. I got Schenk at 35 as my number, so I think even if 40, 42 is the best number still out there, for me in Illinois at least, I think I'm going to go after it. Spoiler alert, he is my one and done pick. Oh, I get to pick Spencer's guy today too. I forgot about that.
I can't give you Adam Schenk now as an option, I guess.
Correct. I just want to real quick. Roberto said it too pre-show. I truly like. I was still think I'm interested in Stephen Yeager if we do have one or two more like elite players in this field. And the fact that he's not there and the number is 35 to 1 on Bet365, like that's almost my favorite outright play of the year. I think like in terms of form, I don't know, like right now, current form, he probably is the best golfer in the field, in my opinion. I know Roberto, you kind of said that. I like who's better right now? Like Jordan Spieth, okay. Pedigree-wise, yes. Siwoo Kim for half the odds, absolutely not. I like sure he's good, but Jason Day, like, I'm sorry, Spencer, but I think I'd take Yeager heads up over Jason Day. Minwoo Lee's got a ton of upside. I'm just going like he's the shortest. Alex Noren, every single book loves Alex Noren. Alex Noren's actually lighting it up this season. Spencer Weir just a year early on that debacle. Adam Scott is just priced that way because he's got the name value and a beautiful face and a better looking swing. Then extremely dude, give me. I feel like I'd still be interested at Steven Yeager at like 22-1 in this field. I wouldn't take it. Like obviously we get 35, but I don't know. I think that's the best play on the board this week, and it's the German Hammer. So what are we gonna do?
I think there are a lot of guys who are priced ahead of him who have bigger names who aren't playing as well right now. And then you have other guys who are playing well, but I don't think their ceiling is as high as his. The only person who I think doesn't fit either one of those two molds is Siwoo Kim, who's playing phenomenal golf. I think he has 11 starts this year, none worse than a tie for 44th. But it's a putting contest this week, and I don't know that he has that upside. Whereas when Steven Yeager won in Houston, sure, he's lost strokes putting 5 of his last 6 starts, but the one week where he did gain strokes, he gained over 6 strokes for the week on the green. So he has upside with the putter, which I think is something you need to consider this week because you're going to need to get into that 25 under par range, especially with there being some projected weather coming in with rain on Thursday night into Friday and then potentially on Saturday. So the course could play really soft, which would also potentially even give him a bigger advantage off of the tee because of how far he carries the ball. So those are
it's going to be a lot of mid irons for him when other people are hitting 4 and 5s.
Yeah, I like his upside as much as anybody else's this week. Nick, who else you got on your card?
I'm riding the Adam Schenk play. I think Spencer's dead on everything about his game and just the familiarity. How do I say that word? That's
familiarity.
That's a tongue twister for me also. Every time that I say it on air, I always question myself of why I've gone down that route.
Yeah, the familiarity and just the consistent success on bent grass greens. If his game's in form, and the distance for me is grading extremely well. He's hitting the driver very, very well this season. He's a big dude. Indiana guy, I believe, right? So plays a ton of Midwest golf on bent grass. I like that. So, yeah, that's right. Boiler up. So I'm going to move on Adam Schenk at 40-1. I know 50-1's a fantastic ticket, but again, I have him priced at 35. And on a card where, like Spencer, I kind of went wild west on outrights in this mid to upper tier range. I think Adam Schenk fits that just fine. I did take Minwoo Lee, as you guys know, 29-1. I just think the upside, he's someone that could get extremely high with the putter, grades top 5 for me in bent grass putting. It's just what approach game shows up. But like Steven Yeager, like Matthias Schmid, like these guys bomb it off the tee, it's going to be a different course for the guys that hit that long, especially when you're as long as Minwoo Lee. Davis Thompson, just because he's like a love child of mine, 66-1. I think every course fits him well, but when he can really light it up off the tee, I think that's a good spot for him. Matthias Schmid, 100-1. And then I did take it like a safe guy who graded extremely well for me. Let me tell you his price. I mentioned his name earlier. I had Mark Hubbard at 44-1. I don't know if that's bad pricing by my numbers, but 60-1 on Bet365 for Mark Hubbard. So Hubbard, Schmid, Thompson, Schenk, Yeager, Minwoo Lee.
Minwoo Lee gives me some. He reminds me somewhat of Jason Day in that he is long off the tee, great short game, can get really hot with the putter. Wouldn't quite put him on Jason Day's putting level because Jason Day's done it for over a decade.
Right.
But if the approach play spikes, I think this could be a great week for him.
Yeah, I kind of look at him like Yeager. Like when Yeager's putter spikes, and Spencer has said for like the last 2 years, if he can have a spike round with a putter, like it's his tournament to lose, I kind of feel the same way with Minwoo and his irons. And to compare him to Jason Day, he's got much better clothing that he wears with the Lululemon. So some clothes that actually fit. So I will take Minwoo Lee over Jason Day there too, Spencer, if you want another like one and done bet or something like that for the future.
These one and done bets have gone disastrously bad for me. Like you got the win. Roberto, I don't know how you got a push last week.
So
what was your guys' bet? I forgot it. When I was listening, I was on the road.
Spencer pulled some numbers from when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. From Russ.
This is how Webb's good in my model, by the way. But yes, continue.
So Russ Knox is still 65 years old. Hasn't finished better than like 35th on the Corn Ferry Tour, the Champions Tour, PGA Tour Champions officially, since like 2018. And He's playing Russ Cochran, 65 years old. His son is Eric Cole's caddy. So that's a connection. They're playing together. Spencer wanted to find a way to back them. There's nobody offering matchups with Russ Cochran. So we came up with a matchup where I think I took Norman Xiong and McCormick against Russ Cochran and Eric Cole. After the first round, Xiong and McCormick, so they were trailing for most of it. And then they birdied like 3 or 4 in a row. They were up by 3 shots going into the second round. First round was best ball. Second round was alternate shot, which is where I wanted to fade Cochran and Cole the most. And somehow they shot a better score, if not the same score as the day before on alternate shot, which is way more impressive. And my guys shot even. So we ended up pushing. I believe on the last hole or two, Cochran and Cole made a bogey or a double bogey. And on the 18th hole, so that was their last hole. And then on my team's last hole, we made a birdie. So it looked great for me going into the second day. It looked poorly with a couple holes left. No blood, though, so neither of us will pick each other's.
That is the most degenerate bet I've ever heard, and I absolutely love it. Like, no one has any action on those guys ever, let alone in that event, and you guys do. So
a couple things about that, though. Like, because I do think it was an interesting position here. My argument for Cole and Cochran was I thought they were a fringe team that could make the cut. If they don't go double bogey on 17 and then they end up parring 18 there was a 3-shot lead with 2 holes to play, Roberto. Like, I don't know how you weaseled out of that one and got a push out of it. I also talked on the show, and I stand by the sentiment, like, as much as I can. Alternate shot for Cole and Cochran is actually good for them because Eric Cole cannot hit a driver to save his life. You get Russ Cochran, who's going to just put it dead center 230 yards. Is going to be better than or the same of what Eric Cole's doing. We saw it in alternate shot. They put it together. Yeah, you could make an argument that maybe I got a little bit lucky to even be in that position to have a chance. But I was hoping Cole and Cochran were going to make the cut. And unfortunately, if they don't go double bogey par, they do get in at 8 under par there, I believe. So I like my stance there. You know, it is what it is. Nick lucked out with Justin Thomas becoming Justin Thomas again.
Yeah,
doesn't end up hitting anything when the tournament before that I'm fading Justin Thomas and Nick just knows when to bet and when not to bet. But Nick will have my one and done pick. I will give him 2 options. I'm trying to figure out a way. I would have liked to have taken Adam Schenk, and that's probably a good segue into the section right now. But I'm not going to give Adam Schenk as an option because I don't really want Nick to say, yeah, take Adam Schenk. That's a great pick.
Yeah, no. Yeah. Shout out to everybody that tuned in to hear about Eric Cole and Russ Cochran because that is fantastic stuff. But yeah, one and done. So let's do it, Roberto, if you're ready.
All right. I'll get us started. I really don't love the one dorm board. I don't have a confident pick. I have Benny On in there. The guys I would have wanted to use, Siwoo Kim and Steven Yeager, I've already used. So I've got Benny On in there. Schenk was somebody I considered. Jake Knapp, somebody I considered. Thomas Dietrich, Mackenzie Hughes, and Luke List, also players I considered. I reserve the right to change to any of them. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I don't love this board. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out which guys I would like to use later, and just by process of elimination, come back down to 1 or 2. But I think it's going to be between Dietrich, Hughes, and Benny On.
This is exactly what happened in Houston, by the way. Oh, I'm taking Luke List. That's going to be my pick. I'm on air this week. I'm going to be talking about this. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Steven Yeager is your pick. So I don't know what's going on. This is a fake
gamesmanship,
rigged contest at this point.
It was List or Yeager, and then List was in our feature groups, and I didn't want to have the conflict of rooting on List, and also List can't putt. So, or he can putt now. But the short game was what I was worried about that week. It wasn't the putter. But yeah, I was confident about List last week. I've been bullish on List. I'm going to use him at some point. So this might be the week.
I'll go real quick, Spencer, because you're going to be the entertaining portion. I was between Alex Norenchuk. Adam Schenk, I think, gets a little bit different, but as you guys know, I am in first, so I don't need to get it a whole lot different, but I'm still going to go with Adam Schenk. I think, like you said, Roberto, it's kind of a putting contest. Siwoo Kim is available for me, but that kind of scared me away from him. Noren, I can always support, but I'm going to go with Adam Schenk, the Midwest guy on the bent grass. So, Spencer, I need 2 options for you, and based on our bet, I get to choose who you go with. So make them good.
This is a strategical move here because I have to figure out who I think you're actually going to pick for me. And that doesn't even necessarily give it away. Like maybe I want you to do this. Maybe I don't want you to do this.
Okay. I like the head games here. You know who you have available, right?
No.
Well, you should pull that up. Go ahead. I got it. You can't use Jaeger.
Yes.
You can't use Rye. And I think you're clean other than that.
Okay. Jordan Spieth or Alex Noren?
That's tough. I think with you being in 10th place, more people ahead are likely to play defense and play Alex Noren. I'm going to make you go with Alex Noren. I feel like if for your placement, you're not like out of it by any means. You're one win away from being right up there, but Jordan Spieth has that upside, and I don't think anybody else will play him. So, yeah, you're going to not gain much ground, Alex Noren.
Just as a heads up,
I don't even want Alex Noren. I have made an absolute disastrous mistake in this contest.
You got to take Alex Noren. Thank you, JT.
So just as an update, in the prior two tournaments, because there was no one and done for us last week at Zurich, in the prior tournament, half of our pool picked Patrick Cantlay, who got a couple $1 million for his third place finish. And then the week before that, we had another 4 people pick Scotty Scheffler, including Nick, to vault him into first place. So Nick is in first place by over $1 million. And then we have a handful of golfers, or a handful of pool players between $1 and $2 million behind, and then we have a few others hanging out with Spencer a little farther back. But we'll see what happens this week. Big couple weeks coming up, where Memorial next week, I believe, and then not Memorial. We have Wells Fargo next week, and then after that we have the PGA Championship. So that's potentially $8 million you could win in those 2 weeks, plus another, I think, around 2 this week. Probably get between 1.6 and 1.9. I haven't checked the purses. But not a ton of action coming this week. But next 2 weeks could be huge. Hopefully we get a winner who's not Scotty for more than $2 million among us.
And the Wells is elevated, right?
Was immediately dwarfed. Yeah, well, Wells will be $4 million. So that should be, I think, the same as the PGA.
Can I ask a question before we move this show out into the end of it? Because it'll help me sleep better at night at this point. In the hypothetical world that, and I'll just include them all as one, that I would have said Adam Scott, Jordan Spieth, Jason Day with Alex Noren. Like, would I have gotten any of those other options outside of Alex Noren?
I probably would have given you. I like Adam Scott this week. I probably would have gave you Jason Day. If you probably should have kept Noren off there.
Obviously, I big brained this, and it was probably too straightforward of like a solution. I was hoping that you wouldn't go this route. Like, I know that we have talked about not necessarily liking the top of the board, and you mentioned how Alex Noren was a potential route that you were going to take, which in theory doesn't really make sense for me to probably include him just because you're in first place. So you're front running the contest. It's a lot different using Alex Noren there than me being in 10th in this position. But I was trying to get some way possible that I could land on Jordan Spieth because of the upside. I think this is a brilliant spot for him to use in one and done contests. I know people are upset with what we kind of have, and that would have been my selection, either him or Shank. And now I have, here's what will be fitting though, Nick, with all the Alex Noren stuff that has happened with us over the past 2 years. If he at least wins this contest, I feel like this will be the ultimate where one thing's going to, or the other is going to happen. Either I'm going to love Alex Noren and you will hate him more than you ever have, or vice versa of that answer.
No, it's great. The week that I'm technically fading him and you were trying to fade him to get me to pick JT or to get Jordy, we still can't get Alex Noren right, and he wins it and helps you out and hurts me again. So that'll be perfect.
Fingers crossed.
All right, guys. Do we have any more bets on your cards for this week? I know you had the robust outright. Spencer?
No, that's it for me right now. The only other wager that I was considering, and I don't think I'm going to get there just from a safety answer, and I would love to hear your guys's, or I guess, Nick, your opinion on this. Do you have any thoughts on Beau Hossler versus Ben Griffin in a matchup?
The market hates Beau Hossler.
I know.
And Ben Griffin grades really well for me, but so does Beau Hossler. And what's the price? Let me pull up where the market's at on him. I would lean Well, yeah, so it's what, Griffin minus 120. I feel like I'd still lean Bo Hostler there. I would have Bo Hostler as a slight favorite.
Yeah, I thought at plus 100 it was an intriguing number. The only thing that pushed me off of it is if you take some of the safety numbers, which will matter here with the tournament with the cut, Griffin saw a nice increase inside my model where Hostler went in the opposite direction. I would probably make an argument here that Hostler's better suited as like a high upside sort of play than he would be in any of these safety markets. And I think that's where the market is reacting in this spot to begin with. But from a statistical perspective, Ben Griffin was one of the big decreasers for me when I looked at expected putting on this course. So that's kind of what pushed me in the direction of wanting to fade him. But I don't think I'm going to ultimately get there. I do think plus 100 is value, but how much value we're talking about, I guess, is what's up in the air right now, just because we're looking at a golfer in Hostler that clearly has a lower floor.
Agreed.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So nothing else for me, though. That was the only other thing I was considering right now. I'll probably, before this is all said and done, bet Peter Quest in one of these placement markets as a top 10 or 20 to get a little bit more exposure that way.
Oh, I wanted to touch on Quest earlier. Just remarkable story. So this guy was chasing Mondays last year and eventually got some starts and notably tied for fourth at the Rocket Mortgage, tied for 14th last year here at the Byron Nelson, and then tied for fourth at the Rocket Mortgage Classic to get him that special temporary status that got him some more starts. He didn't get enough points to become a full PGA Tour member, but he's been on the Corn Ferry Tour, where this year he's got 6 starts, 5 missed cuts, and a T47. But he Mondayed into the Valero Texas Open, tough golf course there, TPC San Antonio, the Oaks course, ties for 10th there, and then because of the top 10 finish, he gets another start into the next event, which is the Corrales Punta Cana Championship, ties for 9th there, and because he finished in the top 10, he gets another start, which is this week, where he finished in the top 15 last year. So a lot of reason to like him. Hasn't played at really any of the big time courses, so not playing on the toughest courses, but he's a guy who bombs the ball and he putts it really well. So there's definitely upside. I bet him at the end of last year at certain times. So I think Peter Quest is somebody who's a really intriguing player to keep an eye on this week, and hopefully I'll be able to call some of the shots on some featured hole action later this week. But very intrigued by him. How many guys in the history of the PGA Tour have had 2 starts on the PGA Tour, 2 top 10s, while in the same season missing over 80% of their cuts on the Corn Ferry Tour? I don't know. Weird, but interesting. So keep an eye on Peter Quest this week. Guys, let's do a quick rapid fire. We touched on most of the guys at 35 to 1 or shorter already. So I will bump this out to the 40s. At 45 to 1, we touched on Keith Mitchell, so we'll skip him. Thomas Dietrich is 45 to 1. Mackenzie Hughes is 45 to 1. If you had to pick between one of those two guys in the outright market at that number on a free ticket, which one would you take, Nick?
I'd go with Dietrich.
Spencer?
I would take Mackenzie Hughes.
All right, moving down. He didn't win it here last year, but he won the prior 2 times. This tournament has been held at TPC Craig Ranch. K.H. Lee, man who said that it's his goal to be known as the sexiest golfer in the world. He's 55 to 1 this week. Maverick McNeely, coming off a missed cut last week where he was partnered with Tom Hoagie, is 60 to 1. Aaron Rye is also 60 to 1. If you had to take a ticket on Rye, McNeely, or Lee, which one did you take, Nick?
Maverick for me. Got very close to getting there in real life anyway, so I'm going to go here.
It's a funny answer there because like the one name that missed my card that was the closest was Maverick McNeely. I doubled down on that answer that Nick just gave. This is a really nice spot for him. There's a lot of upside to be had.
One of the best putters on the PGA Tour over the last few years. Could go low this week. Bo Hostler, 60 to 1. Seamus Power is also 60 to 1. So, and Mark Hubbard is 65 to 1. Nick, I know you have him on your card, but among the other two guys, which one do you guys like in the outright market?
Give me Seamus. I was very close to getting there too. I think Maverick was one spot closer and then ran out of room, so didn't get either. But I like Seamus. I think his game's coming back around, and we know he's got winning upside and has that pedigree of a big-time player. So give me Seamus.
Hostler for me for a lot of the reasons that I talked about.
Right.
There's upside numbers. Like he was one of the biggest climbers that I had in my sheet for just win equity compared to overall rank. Couldn't quite get there at the price that we have to pay in the market, but when you get rid of some of the safety returns for him, he's a top 20 player for me in this field.
Seamus Power, by the way, coming off a tie for 12th at the RBC Heritage. Gained strokes on approach in 5 consecutive tournaments. We know he can be a streaky player, so somebody to watch out for this week and potentially next couple weeks when he gets some starts. We'll end with this one going down to 75-1. Nick, you already have Davis Thompson, so I'll leave him there. Doug Gim is 75-1. Ben Griffin's also 75-1. Our boy Kevin Yu is 90-1. Ryan Fox is 90-1. Luke List is 90-1, and the man who just doesn't stop making cuts, Chan Kim, is also 90-1. So between Gim, Griffin, Yu, List, Fox, and Chan Kim, which one would you rather have the ticket on to win outright, Nick?
Personally, it would be Chan Kim, but financially, I would actually take Ryan Fox in this spot for the upside.
Spencer.
Here's the problem, Roberto, and you and I know this probably better than anybody. I'm going to say Kevin Yu. I'm also not so sure that Kevin Yu can make a putt ever from any distance, from any range. Like, he's dead last in my model in expected putting for this tournament. Ball striking numbers, elite.
Maybe more of a first round leader play than a 4-round play, if you can trust his putter for that. But we know if you listen to the show, we love his upside. We love how he stripes the ball. Probably rather target him on a tougher golf course than this one, but who knows? We saw him get close to the John Deere, and I believe he was in the top 3 in strokes gained putting there last year. So he can do it. Probably not going to stay hot for multiple weeks at a time, but for 4 days, anything can happen. Fellas, where can we find your content this week and over the next few weeks?
At Better Golf Pod on Twitter and at StixPicks, XTIXPICKS on Twitter as well. But yeah, excited to get back at it. And as we get loose for the elevated event next week at the Wells Fargo and the PGA Championship 2 weeks after that.
Spencer, where can we find your work this week?
Yeah, like Nick said, there's a lot of interesting tournaments coming up, including major championships. So there's going to be a lot of content that we're going to have here at Action Network. You can get some of my deeper thoughts. We'll look into this board on Wednesday to figure out exactly where the market has moved, where the value sits right now. If I had a clean slate to build from, where exactly would I go? I include that in my Wednesday article every single week at Action. I will have some in-tournament bets. Didn't have any last week. I talked to you about it, Roberto. Very challenging tournament at the Zurich to be able to provide some of that in-tournament information. We're going to be back to having statistical numbers to be able to pull from. So that'll be out during the week. And then you can also get my model over at Rotoballer.
Awesome. Highly recommend checking out that model. So much that you can take a look at, weigh yourself, and come up with your own projections for each week. So highly recommend checking that out. You can find me on Twitter at RobertoA213, and you can find me this week along with DA Points in our featured group and marquee group coverage, along with some featured holes as well. So very excited to be a part of the coverage for this week's CJ Cup Byron Nelson. Going to be doing 3 out of the 4 tournaments for PGA Tour Live in the great state of Texas. So I'm very excited about that as a native Texan. Hopefully Jordan Speith plays well, because I'm sure he'll be in some of our coverage. But even if he doesn't play well, we know it'll be entertaining nonetheless. Of course, you can always find everything you need related to learning about sports gambling and what picks you should make on the Action Network app. We got you covered here from golf perspective, but it's also the NBA playoffs. NFL draft was last week. Spencer JC Latham went way under 14.5. Didn't quite land on number 5 exactly, but strong play there. You can find all of our coverage for any sport you want: baseball, basketball, off-season football bets. We've got people betting on the Rookie of the Year already. So be sure to check it out on the Action Network app, website, or in podcast form. I want to give a big thanks to our producer, Noah Niederhofer, for doing all the hard work and getting us across the finish line. And otherwise, just want to say a big thanks to everybody else who makes this podcast possible, especially our head producer, Matt Mitchell, along with David Payne. So thanks again to you at home for listening. And here's to hoping you hit the green this week at TPC Craig Ranch.